As they have dared, so shall I dare. Dare to tell the truth, as I have pledged to tell it in full, since the normal channels of justice have failed to do so. My duty is to speak out. I do not wish to be an accomplice in this travesty. My nights would otherwise be haunted by the spectre of the innocent man, far away, suffering the most horrible of tortures. Émile Zola wrote this infamous and inflammatory J'accuse in 1898, and despite the desperate years of the Second World War and the cowardly collaboration of the Vichy regime, today France is home to about 600,000 Jews. But now many French Jews are convinced that anti-Semitism has become socially acceptable, and French Jews are not alone in thinking this. Across Europe, anti-Semitism is on the rise, and though history should shout in our ears, many seem deaf to what this means for the European ideal.
According to the recent European Union Fundamental Rights Agency survey of the 8 countries in which over 90% of Europe's Jews live, approximately 1 in 4 of those surveyed reported having been the victim of an anti-Semitic attack or harassment in the previous year. 3/4 of the respondents surveyed said that anti-Semitism in their country had gotten worse over the past 5 years.
When I walk on the street, here in Brussels, in the capital, I always look around to the right, to the left, and to my back. I always have to make sure that I keep something in my hand, could be even a key, but I know that something can happen at any moment. When the attack at the Jewish Museum happened, some people asked me, what do you think? I said, we were not surprised. We knew it's going to happen. Something may happen today or tomorrow, to me or to any other Jew across this continent. So the problem of anti-Semitism, it became a threat of the life of 3 million people who live in Europe.
In a Paris suburb this month, a young Jewish couple became the most recent victims of violent anti-Semitism. They were brutally attacked. French Prime Minister Manuel Valls said he was surprised there were not more demonstrations on the streets against anti-Semitism and racism. This abominable crime, this violence, the rape of a young woman, the attack on a family because they were Jewish, that's not France, he said. Zola would have agreed.
We hear every day that there are more cases all over Europe. There are 2 sides, I would say. One is, of course, the historic. It's a very sensitive issue. But certainly we are as well in the era of growing extremism and population and hate speech.
There's always been prejudice in people, prejudice in groups in our community. But also there now are international aspects to it. The linkage of Jewish people to Israel, the relationship of Israel and the Middle East with other countries, with Arab countries, with Palestine and so on. All of these things are now coming to play.
I do not think it's the role and the job of the Israeli government to do something against anti-Semitism here in Europe, because I think it's one of the main problems that people mix criticism of the Israeli government with criticism of anybody who's being Jewish.
I truly feel that people use Israel as an excuse to fight against Jews and not as a reason. When I see today a person from Morocco, I don't blame him for what's happening in the Sahara. When I see a Chinese, I don't blame him for what's happening in Tibet. When I see a Turk, I don't blame him for what's happening with Kurds. And when I see even a Russian person, I don't blame him for the problems in Ukraine. So there are so many conflicts in the world. How can people come and decide to kill a Jew in France because another Jew in Israel have some political problems with his neighbors?
We liberal democracies hold sacred the right of citizens to express their political views and to offer criticism of government, whether of foreign governments or of our own. Protests and other forms of political expression are cornerstones of our democracies. But we must be equally unified and unequivocal that such protests can never be an excuse for anti-Semitism or incitement to violence.
In the last summer, we had over 10 demonstrations against Israel, although there are so many conflicts in the world during the time, and not only that, each demonstration against Israel became a very dangerous place for Jews to walk around.
The Israel-Palestine conflict may blur emotions, but this should not diminish European values. Opposing anti-Semitism is not about supporting Israel. Émile Zola understood that.
When you see what's happening now in the Middle East, and especially in Syria, with jihadists from Europe going to fight them and coming back, then you have like what happened in Brussels with the Jewish Museum, you know, with violent attacks. So it has become a more violent anti-Semitism, and official figures show this trend. For example, in France, but also in Germany, also in Belgium, you have more and more violent anti-Semitic incidents.
Anti-Semitic attacks in France have more than doubled in the past 10 months. And while France is attracting the most attention, there is a clear statistical trend across Europe. Attacks against Jews and Jewish property are rising.
The atmosphere among the citizens is changing a lot. Maybe this is the consequence as well of EU crisis, of moral and social crisis, and disrespect of fundamental rights in many countries of European Union, as well as a high democratic deficit.
Even though they might not be outspokenly anti-Semitic, I think the rise of the right parties clearly leads to more visibility of anti-Semitism, to more of a prevalence.
The European Parliament has changed a lot. We have many more politicians that are either far right or far left, or they are populists or nationalists. And this is a completely different narrative than we were used maybe 10 or 20 years ago.
In Hungary, where the extreme ethnic nationalist Jobbik party finished second in May elections, and where public opinion polling has shown a high level of anti-Semitic attitudes, the government has cracked down as well on the independent press and civil society groups.
The rise of the right parties gives people the feeling that it's okay to be racist, anti-Semitic, xenophobic.
It's easy for everyone to say that the rise of anti-Semitism and the rise of the right-wing parties, the extremists, let's say so, parties in Europe, based on the economical crisis. I said that it's easy to say because it's more important to say how we can manage, how we can solve the problem.
I think smart people should study from the past, and history showed us that all the problems that maybe started with the Jews, like anti-Semitism, at the end of the day led to a catastrophe to the entire citizens, not only the Jews. Indeed, 6 million Jewish people died, but at the same time another 59 million people, not Jews, also were killed at that time. So we see, at the end of the day, if we don't take care about anti-Semitism, it will be a problem for all of us.
Rising anti-Semitism is rarely the lone or the last manifestation of intolerance in a society. Quite the contrary, it is often the canary in the coal mine for the degradation of human rights more broadly.
As US Ambassador Samantha Power said in Berlin, make no mistake, we have a problem. But what is the solution? How does Europe weaken anti-Semitism? How can the European Union, which was created as a bastion to stand against the future destruction of Europe, allow member states such as Hungary to undermine democratic freedoms and to permit anti-Semitism to go largely unchallenged?
It's very difficult to fight something like anti-Semitism with laws. Of course, you need to have the laws that clearly say it's a crime. But on the other hand, you need much more. You need a cultural shift.
Civil society has an absolutely indispensable role to play in this effort, from preventing anti-Semitism through community outreach and education to building the bridges between religious and ethnic groups that are the foundation to harmonious communities, to joining governments in swiftly condemning anti-Semitic acts when they occur.
It needs to be very clear that it's not accepted in the political sphere and that it's not culturally accepted.
We are lacking the idea of an educational system which provides the children by the ideas that they are not the center of the world, that our states are not the center of the planet. We have neighbors and we have to think about them. We have some other people who suffer and we have to do something about them. This is the ground on which we have to base our fight.
Even if young people are born into a prejudiced situation against one race or one religion or another, we do have an opportunity in our schools to try and make sure that those prejudices are lost, those prejudices are re-educated out of young people.
There is no quick fix, but an improving economy will certainly help. European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker has frequently said, that if the European Union fails, he fears our return to war. And as Ambassador Samantha Power said, anti-Semitism is the canary in the coal mine.
Combating anti-Semitism is not and cannot be seen as a Jewish issue. It is a human rights and civil rights issue.
To fight radical ideas, you need some more radical ideas. You can't find all this phenomenon by just trying to analyze them. You need to give to the people their rights, which is right on their life, right for education, right for good health system.
Maybe it's the time to once again remind us on what is solidarity, what is the respect of fundamental rights, what are these high norms and standards that we fight for in European Union.
Just as growing hostility toward Jews in a country tends to dovetail with a rise in illiberalism and other forms of oppression, so can efforts to combat anti-Semitism play a critically important role in advancing Europe's most sacred principles.
In France and in other countries, we didn't have only dark moments in our history. We did have also the Enlightenment, and we have to go through that again.
Shlomo Carlebach used to say, if he meets a student who says he is a Protestant, he knows he's a Protestant. If he meets a student who says he's a Catholic, he knows he's a Catholic. But if he meets a student who says he is a human being, he knows he is a Jew.